Okay, we're going to call the July 5th, 2022 zoning hearing board meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Coke.
Here.
Regan.
Here.
Willits.
Here.
Stewart.
Here.
Duff.
Here. Okay, a few announcements before we get started, since we have a packed house. The board met in executive session prior to this meeting to discuss legal matters. We do have a packed house tonight, and I know why everyone is here tonight. I just want everybody to be aware and be mindful of the fact that we have a court reporter here that is making an official record of this hearing, because this can be appealed to common pleas court. So if you hear something you don't like, if you disagree with, you wait until it's your turn to speak. I don't want to hear anybody talking over anyone else, moaning and groaning, none of that. I want complete order of this meeting until we adjourn. If not, then we'll just adjourn the meeting and then we'll continue it next month. And then when it comes time for testimony, we are not obligated to entertain redundant and irrelevant evidence. We have a stack of letters that were submitted by many of the residents. We're going to swear each of you in as a group. We would kindly ask that you appoint maybe one or two people to speak for the group. If not, if everyone wants to speak, then there will be a time limit on everybody's time at the microphone. And again, if it's testimony that's been given by other residents prior to, we're just going to cut it off and proceed to the next point or the next person, because if we're not going to keep on taking redundant testimony over and over and over again about the same thing. And it also has to be relevant to what the issues at hand are. So that being said, after all of that, do we have the first item on our agenda is the approval of the June 6th meeting minutes.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask the staff, I know there were 2 or 3 minor corrections sent in. Did those get corrected in the minutes? So that it's the corrected minutes?
Yes.
Then I would move that we approve the corrected summary for May 2nd.
Do we have a second?
2022.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Cook, second by Mr. Duff. Roll call, please.
Duff.
Yes.
Stewart.
Yes.
Willits.
Yes.
Regan.
Yes.
Coke.
Yes.
Next item on our agenda is communications. Our first item is our invoice from our solicitor, Mr. Montgomery, for professional services at the June 6th meeting, an amount equal to $649. Do we have a motion to send this on to council for payment?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Coke.
Yes.
Regan.
Yes.
Willits.
Yes.
Stewart.
Yes.
Duff.
Yes.
Okay, we don't have an invoice from our court reporter, so we'll just approve that next month once we have an invoice. We have no old business, so that means we launch straight into new business. The first matter tonight is case number 2831. The applicant is Joseph and Pamela Viola. Apologize if I mispronounced that. Property is 5018 Orchard Avenue. The request is for a dimensional variance to prevent a side yard less than the required 20 feet in order to accommodate an addition of an attached garage with living space above. Who is here to speak on behalf of this case? Please step forward. Okay, would you raise your right hand, please, to be sworn in?
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the testimony and evidence that you are about to present in this case?
I do.
Thank you.
And would you please give your name and address for the court reporter, please, and spell your name?
Joseph Viola, 5018 Orchard Avenue, Western Park, PA, 151.
Okay, you may proceed with your case.
Well, I'm seeking approval from the zoning board for the dimensional zoning variance for side yard less than 20 feet. I currently have 26 feet current on the side yard, allowing me only 6 foot building space to add in addition to the building. So I'm seeking your approval to lessen that. My application, I'm assuming you folks have an opportunity, I hope, to review that. Looking to add an addition, garage addition, hopefully 16 feet for just an oversized single-car garage, possibly an upper master bedroom suite, depending on how things cost out as we proceed. We're in preliminary stages now at this point, so we're not sure how things are going to cost out. So minimum garage addition, possibly again for an upper single-story apartment addition.
And you said you have 26 feet currently as your side yard for the property line to where the house is?
Correct. Yes, there's a survey in the packet that shows 26 feet to the property line.
So you're requesting a variance that would take the 20-foot required side yard and half down to 10 feet. Is that correct? Okay. Any questions from board members? Please proceed, Ms. Stewart.
In your application, it says final design still to be determined. Is that whether you're just gonna have the garage addition without the space above, or does that include any variance, any difference in the footprint? Is it still gonna be only 16 feet?
No, it'll be at least 16 feet for the garage. Whether we put the garage will be 16 feet. If we put a room above it, it'll maintain that same 16 foot. The footprint will be the same.
That's what, I want to know what I'm voting on. Am I
Right.
voting on a 16-foot addition, or are you going to change it in a foot or something like that?
You know, I don't think, it won't be any bigger than 16 feet as I
Okay.
proposed in the packet. Again, once we hire the architect to do the planning and so forth, then we determine the cost of the determine whether or not we spend the money to do the full addition with the single story above.
Well, if your variance is granted, you could certainly go less than 16, but you could not go more than 16, or else you would get a visit from our wonderful folks here at the municipality, and they would put a stop work order on you.
Of course.
Go ahead, Mr. Cook.
I notice you already have one garage.
Correct.
16 feet means you're adding a double garage, I assume.
Well, 16 foot is just an oversized single garage. I believe, as I stated in there, back in the 50s, when they built those garages, they're very small. And so I was looking to put a larger single car garage. I think to do a double car garage, you need more than 16 feet. You would never be able to put two cars, I don't believe, in 16 foot space. So I was looking for extra room for storage and so forth.
From my memory, and I may be off by a half a foot, a garage door, a single garage door is either 7.5 or 8 feet. Now, so if you put 2 feet on each side of a single garage door, which is big enough for most cars, you'd still have 2 feet on either side. It seems to me that you're trying to put 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound lot.
Well, that's not my intent to make it a two-car garage. To be perfectly
Why not
honest.
go with a 1-car garage and go back further so you have additional room? That way you're not crowding the neighborhood.
Well, if you notice, I did actually, the footprint that I showed on there, I did show it actually going deeper, so that if the intent for the upper room would be larger to make it a nice master bedroom suite if we decided to do that. Again, my intent was to get enough width to make.
Well, if you put 26 feet out there, you'd even have a bigger room, but your lot is only so big. And it seems to me that what you're asking for is a bit excessive for the neighborhood.
I guess it's a matter of opinion.
Why can't you get by with a 10-foot garage instead of a 20-foot garage?
Well, if you look at the design, even though the 8-foot garage door is in there, that space is roughly 13 feet. think my master bedroom is about that 8-foot, that garage space, and I think it's a 14, and I'd have to get the dimensions to be sure. I think it's a 14-foot master bedroom above that garage, so I would say it need at least 14 feet. But I was asking for a little bit of leniency to get, so I have some space. This doesn't make sense to spend the money and shrink it into a small room, especially on the Westminster Street.
I mean, the purpose of the setback requirements is basically so a neighborhood doesn't look like, forgive the analysis, the south side, where everybody's got a row house. And it seems to me you're going beyond what you may minimally need with 20 feet.
Did you see that there are some photos there in the space that you do have? It's pretty, we have some pretty wide space there between the neighbors and also, between the two properties. Trying to give you a nice pictorial as to how it looks.
And you haven't had an architect do a sketch or anything to see how the symmetrics of the front will look. Your existing garage, as you pointed out, is somewhere around 12 or 14 feet. And if you were asking for another 12 or 14 feet, then the second peak, if you will, would be symmetrical to the first one. But if you're asking for a larger one,
Well,
I'm concerned that even if the setback is acceptable, the aesthetics might not be real good.
and that's why I included that picture there. We didn't retain the architect yet, but we did get a quote from him. He has been out, we did talk about how we might do that. They wouldn't line up the front of the house. They would actually set back the addition a couple feet. They wouldn't, they say you either make it look the same or actually make it look totally different. You never do one or the other, so try to.
And if I understand from the picture of your backyard is fairly flat with the garage level. It might be 2 or 3 feet high.
No, well, on that side of the house, it doesn't, that's why we have to do it on that side of the house, because it looks lower, but it's probably, the whole back of the house is underground, so it's probably 8 feet in the ground.
I guess what I'm approaching is whether you could put the same size addition on the back of the house and stay within the setback.
And you want to actually have a garage in it, though. I don't think that would make much sense to put a garage in the back. I mean, if I had to go through that, I'd probably scrap the whole project.
Thank you.
Any other questions before members?
Mr. Chairman, a question on your survey, you don't have your shed on your survey. That is your shed, right?
Yes, yeah, that went in back when we first bought the property. We've been here 36 years next month, so that was never actually, I don't think, when they did this survey in August of '86, it would have been, that's an old survey. And, Bethel has accepted this survey for all the various projects that we've used through the years.
And it's hard to tell where the shed is at the feet from looking at it from the frontage, but would your shed go away with this project?
Would it go away? I guess it could, not necessarily, but I guess it could necessarily.
And then, I guess, just to give the distance of how far back that proposed addition would be, how close to the shed would that be?
I'd say maybe 10 feet.
Do we know if the shed was ever permitted?
Back then, I don't think it was required 36 years ago.
And then another follow-up question to your application. You have received a letter from Jody Anderson from 5016 in support. Where do they live? Do they live to the left of you or to the right of you?
Right next door where the garage would be built.
Okay. So
Yeah,
Jason-
that would be the house in the pictures, and there's actually, I did give you a copy of her survey, which shows her property. We'll see her property line and structure on this survey.
Okay, and just one final clarification question for me is, on our application, we'll try to look for is hardships, and in your application says there are unique physical circumstances or conditions peculiar to the particular property that creates an unnecessary hardship. So in addition, what is the hardship that you're facing in this particular application?
Well, I guess the main hardship is there's only 6 feet of property. You can't build an addition with 6 foot of clearance with a 26 foot. With a 20-foot variance, there's only 6 foot of clearance when you build. So I need more space to build an addition. I guess essentially, it's a hardship. I mean, I don't know what else can be said.
Okay, no further questions.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question.
And Ms. Stewart?
Let me ask you something. What would be the minimum amount of space that you would be willing to concede for this variance? Is it, if we said 16 was too much? What would it be?
I'd say 14 maybe.
Is that the same size as your other garage?
I believe the dimension of the existing garage is, I believe the interior dimension is around 13.
Thank you.
Sorry, I don't have that information.
One question, one additional one. If you sound uncertain about the height of this addition based on budget or whatever reason, you provided like a rendering or a copy and paste kind of mock-up over a photo. That sort of is in line with if you put the master on, correct?
Correct.
If you did not put that master on, can you describe a little bit about what it would even look like? Would it be flat roof? Can you describe it at all?
I think we would still put a pitched roof similar to what you see there, but it may not go to full height. Again, it would be a matter of, architect give us an opinion on what it would look like. Could it go to full height even if there's not a room above it? It could, I suppose, and just have an oversized storage attic above maybe. I don't know. Again, there's a lot of cost to hire an architect to do a drawing, $3,000, I think, to do a design just preliminarily just to get a variance that may not get, So I was going to spend the money until I got approval from you folks.
Any other questions from board members? This has been properly advertised,
Yes.
properly posted.
Yes.
Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone here opposed to this application? Hearing none. Would someone like to make a motion?
I will move the acceptance of the proposed variance on case number 2831 as listed.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Regan,
Yes.
Coe,
No.
Willetts,
No.
Stewart,
No.
Duff.
Yes.
Well, unfortunately, your variance request has been denied, 3-2. You have a couple of things you can do, you either appeal this and come in police court, or you can probably speak to staff and maybe come back with something that's smaller. Thank you.
Folks?
Okay, the next application is 2832. Applicant's name is Edward Kuhlfeld. Applicant's address is 5155 Priscilla Drive. This is a request for a dimensional variance to permit an addition on the front yard of the house that reduces the required front yard size of 35 feet, reduces the side yard of 10 feet, and reduces the 20-foot buffer area. Okay, is the applicant here?
Yes.
Please step forward to the microphone. And if you're both will be providing testimony, then let me both raise your right hands and have you sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the testimony and evidence you are about to present? Yes.
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, now one at a time, name and address for the court reporter.
Edward Rulefeld, 5155 Priscilla Drive, Port, Pennsylvania, 15112.
Hi, Claire Hulefeld, 5155 Priscilla Drive, Apple Park, PA 15102.
Please proceed with your case.
The request is to put an 11-foot vertical addition towards the street that is no closer to the current house on the neighbor's side. The property addition will come straight off of the corner of the house, so that there will be no further impact to the neighbor on that side of the house, at least from towards their home. It's an 11-foot by 18 across that. The current roof line has 3 feet off of the brick, so the maximum impact on the request is 8 feet past the current drop line. Both neighbors on either side have signed acceptances of this, and so so that's basically the plan for this. The reason that this is the really only alternative for us is that we would only have the only way to move this would be towards the back, and that would impact a deck that we had permitted 4 or 5 years ago. This is to add on to a small kitchen. We are moving closer to the street. The neighbors who would be most impacted on the left-hand side of the property, their house is about 2 or 3 feet closer to the street than ours, so their impact is less on that, and we have signatures from any and all impacted property owners.
Any questions from board members?
The kitchen will stick out 6 feet further than the front of the house, where the existing porch or the bedrooms on the other side. Are there other properties on the street on that side that have additions on the front of the house?
Not additions, but there are a number of them that have like an L-shaped property, right? So the front door is here. There are parts of the structures that are closer to the street than just the bulk of the house.
So there are structures closer than the 35-foot setback?
In our neighborhood, no,
Yes, not.
no,
So yours would be the only one.
right, now we are on a cul-de-sac street, we only have one house at the end, and then there's a house that's right at the dead end that has kind of like an in-law house, and another house, there's a curve to it, so our neighbor that is on the left side that is would be most impacted, we'll still be able to look down the street and around the corner to see all the houses that are on the same side as that.
As you go off of right of the road, I guess it is, you turn left then?
Yeah, we
instead of
turn.
right?
Right, you turn, if you go down off of Brightwood down to like at the stop sign, you turn left, that's Applegate. We follow that all the way up, that street turns in, Applegate turns into Priscilla.
Right.
We are at the end of the top of the hill. And it's, the curved bend. So there's only one other house additional on the street.
Do you have a survey for this property as part of your application?
We did, our builder did drop one off with everything. We didn't bring the other copies we had, but he did drop it off with all the other papers with the survey.
Is it just me that doesn't have a survey or application?
I don't know.
There was no survey with the application.
I mean, not that I could go get it. And, but the builder was supposed to have dropped that off, with this part of the application.
We have several drawings from, I guess, an Action Builders.
That's correct.
Yes.
But what I was looking for is some kind of official survey.
We have it, we understood that part was obviously dropped off as a part of our application.
He had all the paperwork when he left our house, because we made all the copies of these.
It would be helpful to have the survey, so this, we would need that to show where the setback lines are that you're going to be encroaching upon. And your request is for 3 variances, correct, not just 1? That's what the agenda says.
You mentioned a side variance, but our house, we're following the house line, the present house line, we're just going out further. We're just adding on to the front, but the sideline is not.
But the sideline is changing because of bumping that out. It brings you closer to that side property. If I'm not mistaken, your property, didn't go straight back. It sort of was angled. Is that correct?
The whole neighborhood is.
Right, exactly. So within bumping that out, that front of the building out, it's bringing you closer to the side property line also.
And what is the 20-foot buffer variance?
I think where our property line is, there's a 20-foot buffer from the street in, and then there's from our zoning, then there's 35 feet to the house. Because if you look at our survey stakes in the front of the house, it's about 20 feet in from the street.
Maybe what we should do is continue this to next month, and that way you can get that survey and we could review it next month.
We were hoping to have an
Yes.
answer sooner because it just pushes out the construction.
And
And it's already, if we get approval at this point, we're not starting until October, and then we're getting into the winter months. We can run home right now and get the survey and bring it back, and you can have it for after the meeting. We're 5 minutes away.
Well, it's not currently part of the record because it wasn't submitted with the application. We would have to amend your application on the record. We have 3 other cases after this one of which, as you can tell by the crowd behind you, is gonna take a while. So I don't think we should be delaying the meeting while you run home and get your survey. I'd rather you just have somebody drop it off tomorrow, and we'll keep the record open, and we'll just resume this next month.
Are there any other options for that other than?
Not unless our solicitor can think of something.
Well, if they want to come in at the very end and submit the survey, and we could add it to the record at that point, they could amend their application on the record. If there's no opposition,
Well, the issue, we still have to keep the record open because once we get the survey, that might result in additional questions from the board.
right, I agree with that. I think we should just take them out of order and put them at the end of it, and then resume the hearing when they, like the very end when we're doing the survey. If that's the only issue, so we'll do that, any questions about that.
Okay, well, we're gonna table your application for now and give you, the opportunity to go home and get your survey. And hope you have enough copies for all of us. And then, once we conclude the other, business on the agenda, we'll, resume your hearing and vote at that time.
We appreciate the flexibility.
If someone wants to make a motion to that effect?
I move we, table case 2832, until the, end of the meeting.
A second.
And we'll keep the record open.
And keep the record.
All right, Carol seconded that motion, we'll do roll call.
Okay. Do roll call.
Yes, please.
Willetts,
Yes.
Reagan,
Yes.
Coe,
Yes.
Stewart, Duff.
Yes.
Okay, that brings us to application number 2833. The applicant is TY Lynn International. The location is 5261 Library Road. This is a dimensional variance to permit an additional menu board in the drive-through area of a restaurant in the Seafood Commercial District. And this is McDonald's at right at the entrance of South Park. So who's here to represent this application? And aren't you glad you're not last? Okay. Please raise your right hand and be sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the testimony and evidence that you are about to present in this case? Thank you.
Okay, and please name and address for a court report.
Nathan Kuzak, with TY Lynn International, 255 East Avenue, Rochester, New York.
Just spell your last name.
B-U-C-Z-E-K.
That's better, thank you.
We are the civil engineering consultants for McDonald's on this project. As discussed, the project is located at 5261 Library Road. The project is overall a major remodel project as part of McDonald's rebuild. So they're remodeling not only the building, but the site infrastructure from repaving, sidewalks, ADA access, etc. The reason why we're here tonight is to request the one additional menu board within the drive-through to be installed as part of the project. Basically 98% of all the McDonald's, they're going with an additional menu or ordering point. Basically decreases wait time by up to 50%, gets people in and out faster, gets the orders in place, and gets the queues cut down for the drive-throughs. Overall, as part of the project, this tandem layout that we're presenting, or that we presented as far as the layout, works best to limit impacts to the site. We are moving the existing menu board to provide the adequate space between the pay window and the first ordering point or second ordering point in this tandem layout, which typically provides 3 queuing spaces or 3 cars in between those points. That is part of the project. So basically, both menu boards will be located, I believe it's the east side of the building. One right in front of each other, so be right in line. That's pretty much it. The parking reduction, we have existing 47 parking spaces. We're proposing 43 due to impacts mainly for some ADA access points with parking that we're redoing. So we're still within full compliance there. And then we're adding a gateway sign, a pre-browse board, and basically 2 billboards and a new springboard canopy, which is be typical for McDonald's drive-throughs. Right now, the design is for 11 vehicles in the queue. And that will help reduce some of the congestion that sometimes they see during peak times at the site with only one ordering point. I think I have most of it. See if you guys have any questions.
So you're gonna have 2 ordering points, 2 menu boards, but still a single, drive-through lane.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we, just so you guys understand, we looked at what's called a side-by-side, but due to the L shape of the site and the north of the site, it gets pinched down, there's just not enough room, specifically to get the delivery trucks kind of in and out of the site. So we've chosen to go with a tandem layout for this particular location.
Mr. Regan,
Yes.
would the applicant be willing to come up and circle on Ms. Stewart's plan where the particular sign being requested is located? She has a question about precisely where the sign is on the plan.
Yes.
Yeah, why don't you circle where both of the signs are, which one is essentially the one you're requesting the variance for? I imagine one is where the existing
Yes.
sign is.
Yeah, could you label the two both points, and then we can introduce this handwritten version to the record.
Yeah, so
And big letters, current and new.
So existing in here, this is now being moved. The new, the second one, is over here. The second, then we go over them side by side, as you can see there.
Oh, I see how they are.
Yeah.
Okay, this is one and this is two.
Yeah, today, it's here, we only have one vehicle in between, and it does not allow a lot of flexibility to get the orders basically in the queue.
Okay, just for the record, the applicant has marked up this drawing with a 1 to show the existing sign and where the existing sign will be moved to, and then 2 represents the new sign. So I know board members want to look at this, and
Okay, this is number 1, number 1 is being moved here, and then this is number 2. Yes. Go ahead.
This is the existing, it's gonna be eliminated and moved to here, and this is the new one here. Yes.
So the intent of this is to keep the traffic from backing up too close to Library Road.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of times they'll circle around in front of the building and there'll be congestion in the front. And also to get people in and out as fast as they can. Reduce the times.
Yes, we covered this at the beginning. Please no talking during the meeting when testimony is being given. Okay, and for the record, we're going to introduce the drawing that you marked up as applicant's exhibit 1. Give this back to Ms. Stewart.
Different when I get in there.
Do you have any other questions from board members regarding this application?
Mr. Regan, there's, first of all, just a technicality, maybe staff can answer that the application fee was received. It's on, according to, it was submitted on a separate cover.
Yes, I can say it was received.
We did receive it.
You did, okay. Secondly, what would you describe as your hardship of the current, that would require a variance?
The wait time for this particular location, there has been records of additional queues, congestion on site. And, you know, the request is to have an additional menu board to reduce wait times. So.
So
And
the,
I think with, as you mentioned earlier, the additional issue is you don't have the lot depth where the bus south park to add a second lane.
Correct, yeah, due to the L shape of the site, makes it congested on the north side.
what I want to get back to, the hardship is the efficiency is only, the only top that increase, only way to increase efficiency is to add a second menu board.
Correct. And that's basically an additional order point, is pretty much standard with all the rebuilds that the town has been doing.
And what is the current size of the existing sign? Do you know that square footage?
The existing menu board is probably 5 by 5, roughly.
Okay, and then what are the sizes of these new proposed ones?
They are. It's, she's. Yeah, so on sheet C1, it's labeled as S6 menu boards. They are 29.5 square feet.
Just so
That's 5 by 6 roughly.
just a comment, looking at the ordinance, it looks like we might have to have an additional variance because it's a max 20 square feet per menu board sign for each single one. And you said it's about 25 square feet per sign?
Yeah, 29.
Okay, 29.
And we can provide you cut sheets on that if that helps. Because some of that space may not be the actual menu boards or basically screens. Some of it may just be additional space for the borders of menu boards.
And has the municipality seen drawings of these signs yet?
They are, well, the details shows the faces or not. Yeah, basically they are on a C-3. There's a detail on there that shows their screen. Basically, it's 9 by 9 and 9 by 9 each screen.
So the screen is 9 foot by 9 foot?
9, yeah, it looks like 9.9 feet. The total area of it is basically 4 feet by 4'10".
Okay, so we're talking the actual signage is roughly 16 feet.
Yeah, it's not that 29.
It's under 20, is my point.
Yes, correct. Yep. And we can provide additional cut sheet if needed for permitting.
No, I just hoping not to see you back in here to help avoid that.
I appreciate it.
Well, the municipality always likes to get another $500.
And back to, and I'm sure you've done other McDonald's drive-throughs and for other
Yeah.
projects. When you do a tandem layout, is it common just to use one menu board sign? Or would you still have 2 menu board signs for each lane?
You're still gonna, just for the layout, it's hard to see. You know, if you're specifically trying to order, you're concentrating on the menu, having it be another 15 feet away, 20 feet away from the other spot, maybe hard to read. So that's typical. We, even on a side-by-side or a tandem, we get 2 menu boards, correct?
No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions from board members? Okay, has this application been properly advertised?
Yes.
Has it been properly posted?
Yes.
Is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of this application? Or opposed? Hearing none. We have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve case 2833 is submitted.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Willis, second by Ms. Stewart. Roll call, please.
Coke,
Yes.
Regan,
Yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
Duff.
No,
Okay, your application has been approved 4-1. I'm sure it's in conjunction with the renovation of the property, so it expires in 1 year if you don't act on it.
Next step is submit permits for that piece. Or with,
That's a conversation you can have
Yes.
with staff tomorrow.
Okay.
Next up is case number 2835. Applicant's name is Cool Springs Associates. The address is 3001 Cool Springs Drive. This is another sign ordinance, and this is a dimensional variance to prevent additional business identification sign in R3 zoning district. And who do we have here for the applicant?
I'm here on behalf of the applicant. My name is Bill Moldovan, Moldovan. I'm with Kinley Moore. The address is 651 Holiday Drive, Pittsburgh, PA 15220. And I am Bill Limbert, LMBERT, with Cool Springs Associates. It's 11 Stanley Street, Suite 402, Pittsburgh, PA 15220.
Okay, if gentlemen raise your right hands.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the testimony and evidence you are about to present?
I do.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
Thank you, board members, for having us here tonight. I'd like to answer 3 additional exhibits to the 5 board members tonight that weren't included in the original application. We can do that now, and then I'll go through.
Just do it now, it's probably the best way to do it. And if you just tell us what you're submitting here as additional evidence.
The 3 items are a site plan that shows the location and plan view of a proposed monument sign, and 2 photos indicating current conditions where that monument sign is going to go. Just for a little more clarification, this is an association with the use variance that was granted last year for their construction of the Kitty Academy, a daycare facility inside the indoor field house. And to be clear, we are requesting a variance from Article, Section 6950.1, which is sign regulations within the R and CD districts. In particular, item number 9, which states that 1 freestanding identification sign for each lot for daycare facilities not to exceed 30 square feet. We're asking a deviation from the ordinance provision for the word 1. Our proposed sign is within the provisions of the ordinance, or about 27 square feet, so we are under the 30. But there are 2 existing monument signs at the intersection of Hamilton and Cool Springs Drive. Our arguments were grounds for the variance. In terms of unique physical circumstances or characteristics of the site, this parcel is zoned residential. However, it does have a conditional use for recreation on a residential parcel. That is a unique circumstance where we are trying to conform to the regulations of the R residential or CD conservation regulations. However, we do have a facility, rather large facility on approximately 9 acres of land that has 5 individual tenants. In terms of no possibility of designing in strict conformance, in order for us to place a monument sign in close proximity to this new facility, this new daycare facility, and have it legible and appropriate for people coming to that site, we do need a sign at the building, at the location of the daycare facility. It's currently 850 feet, approximately 850 feet from the intersection of Hamilton and Cool Springs Drive to the actual location of the Key Academy daycare facility. In terms of the hardship not being created by the appellant, this is a culmination of land development and approval requests over a long period of time. As I'm sure some of you know, it's with coordination and approvals from the municipality's planning and zoning commission, yourselves here, the zoning hearing board, and borough council. So the hardship that exists today has not been created by the appellant, but rather a result of condition of the applicant coming to the municipality, working through some of the challenges that exist with the land development and gaining approvals for the development as it exists today. In terms of altering the essential character of the neighborhood, Cool Springs is an approximately 60-acre facility, a complex campus, if you will. There's retail, there's existing townhomes, senior care facilities, the indoor field house, a driving range, and soon to be 65 townhomes. So as part of that campus, the applicant, who doesn't own all the parcels anymore, but has developed it with care to have a consistent signage character, and we believe that this residential parcel, which is not, does not share the same characteristics of the other residential parcels adjacent, we believe that this will not alter the physical characteristics of this parcel. And I think it would be unfair to have us compare ourselves to a single-family residence that's north along Hamilton Road. And that the variance, if authorized, would be the least possible request. We are requesting one. And like I said before, we believe that our sign, the sign portion that has the Key Academy logo on it is in compliance with the zoning ordinance provisions. So with that said, I open it up to questions if you have any.
Mr. Cook?
On the drawings that you submitted in the photos, where you indicate the proposed location, both of them seem to have a proposed location on the sidewalk.
It's behind the sidewalk. That's why I circled it on the picture, because I thought the application was misleading. It shows it in the sidewalk. We are placing it behind the sidewalk.
This will not narrow the sidewalk at all.
It will not.
Thank you.
In your exhibit F, which is photo 2, shows like a dirt area in front of the building with a black tarp around it. Is that the area where the sign is going to go?
Yeah, that's actually the Key Academy playground we're working on right now. That's been permitted to this municipality as well.
And what is the height of the sign?
10 feet high, roughly.
That's from, obviously the base, okay. Anyone else have any questions?
I have actually a question for the municipality. When you do a sign, is it include the base and around it, or is it strictly just the sign square footage?
I think just the sign.
In case the advertising space. Okay.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, the area in the photo exhibit E, with the black carts, and it has like the Lowe's, vapor barrier or whatever. Above that is a business identification sign attached to the building, correct? What is that?
That's for AHN. When AHN signed the lease with us back in 2015, they have strict exclusivity on all signage on the building. So I cannot put anything Kitty Academy related on the building itself.
And the two monument signs at the intersection, that's the multi sign with all the businesses, right? What's the other freestanding one?
The other one's strictly AHN as well. It's just AHN. But you're correct on that first one, it's multi-tenant.
Okay.
Are you gonna get any more tenants?
We're maxed out in that building. And when you guys moved to Kitty Academy for me about a year ago, give or take that price.
As much as we like seeing you every other month or so, it's been about 4 years. I think you're about better as much, you make potatoes in that sack as,
Just one other question. Why the size of this sign with rough calculation? It looks like you're at 28-ish, maybe a little less than that square feet, but the sign's at 610 by 311. So I don't know, 26, 28 was my math. Is there a reason why you can't go any smaller than that?
We can definitely do that. That came from Kitty Academy construction team to me. That's what they wish to have. It's not like an end all be all. So that's not the end game, doesn't have to stay that size. It's what they would like to have, obviously. Very cool.
Mr. Regan,
Yes, Mr. Duff.
is either the signs illuminated?
There will be lighting on the sign. It's not illuminated, but there'll be like a light fixture above it, so at night time you can see the Kitty Academy school sign. There, so.
Any other questions? Okay, has this been properly advertised?
Yes,
Has the application been properly posted?
yes.
Is there anyone here, and I'm guessing it's no, who would like to speak in opposition to this application? Hearing none, is there anyone here in favor who would like to offer testimony? Hearing none. Any discussion from the board and or a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve case number 2835 as presented.
Do we have a second? Motion, second, roll call, please.
Duff,
Yes.
Stewart.
Yes.
Willetts,
Yes.
Regan,
Yes.
Coe.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Okay, now that the applicant for 2832 has returned to the survey, we'll return to your application now. If you bring the surveys up, please.
We have a copy with the seal on it as well, if that would be helpful. But we got to keep that one.
You have to keep that one, that's fine.
I have.
Photocopies fine.
Be careful of my string that one.
To add a little bit of additional clarity, because one of the things that is a little unclear to me is exactly where my property begins and where it ends. Just went home and measured it quickly. The end of the porch is exactly 50 feet from the road, and what we are proposing is 11 feet off of 6 feet off of the porch line.
The survey is showing that you're exactly 35 feet off the Solar Drive.
That isn't necessarily the paved area.
That's right. So the portion of Priscilla Drive that I may or may not own is, I guess, 35 feet from the front of the property, but the actual property is 50 feet. The house is 50 feet from the paved portion of Priscilla Drive.
Well, it's 35-foot setback from the property line, not from the right of way, correct?
Right.
So your property line is shown, right on the survey, it's 88 feet frontage. Okay, so you have 35 feet from there, and that's exactly where the house is right now. The extent there's additional footage that goes into the right of way that is not part of your lot, then can only count for setback purposes.
Could you tell me where, in relation to your house, Mr. Sheltman, who's 5151 Priscilla, and LaPaglia, Michelle LaPaglia, 5167, where there?
So the Sheltons are to the immediate left of the property.
If you're looking at the survey, it's to the left-hand side. His name is along the side of that survey. And then,
Claire Lucas owns the.
LaPaglia is the other.
is one house, there's one house on the right-hand side from our house, there's one house, and then it's Michelle's.
Same side.
Same side, yes. And there is a form, there should be a form also from Claire Lucas, who is immediately to our right.
Kind of two sides.
Yeah, it's two-sided.
The house to your left, that would be Shelton.
Correct.
Is there a driveway similar to yours between your property line and their house?
Yes, there is.
Could the staff tell me, from what they are interpreting, is the side encroachment de minimis? I mean, is it a foot or less just because of an angle?
Yes.
I'm not minimizing the total,
Sure. Right.
but it's not 3 feet or something.
Right.
This survey is showing that
Yeah, I know.
their side yard setback is currently 7.4 feet. How old is this development?
Well, the house is about, yeah, it's about 45 years,
I think it was 1965.
65, 60 years.
Anyone else have any questions?
Currently, there's a sidewalk and steps along that side.
On your property, yes, there's yes, there was a concrete sidewalk along that side when we purchased, yes.
It actually seems to indicate on the survey, just an observation, that the distance from the house to the property line on that left side, the Shelton side, actually slightly increases as you go forward rather than decreases. I'm not sure if the survey is, the drawing is totally accurate, obviously, but there's no measurement for the back, so I can't tell. Did staff get a copy? We did get a copy.
Yeah.
Well, we will accept the survey as part of the record for this case. Any other questions from board members?
Yeah,
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Just the question is, with the addition, it looks like we're looking for 6 feet out towards, that's what we're talking about here.
Yes.
And it seems like you have a front porch area that's exposed right now. I'm just curious, what is the hardship to why you can't utilize even that space and not that additional 6 feet?
Because one of the key things that we're trying to do with, and really the entire purpose for putting this addition on is to be able to have an island that it would be functional to have, 4 or 5 people in it. And and the ability, so there are 2, that's one, is that this space just simply wouldn't be sufficient to be able to do that. The second piece to this puzzle is the fact that this is really the place where we plan on retiring. And we want to be able to move our washer and dryer upstairs to that, so it's right off the kitchen as well. And so without being able to come out that additional 6 by 18, we just don't have enough space, and it's really not worth it for us to be able to make that investment in our home without that additional space.
I appreciate what you're saying. It certainly appears to be a lovely kitchen. The island that's diagrammed there has 7 spaces. It would seem, while certainly not as plush, I'll say, or luxurious, if a kitchen can be described that way. It seems to me you could still get a fairly decent-sized kitchen. You might have to eliminate the wine cabinet or I'm reading sideways, a bar, or even go back into the area where you currently have your deck and take some of that for your kitchen. But it seems to me that if you stayed parallel to the line of the bedrooms, you could still accomplish what you want to do, perhaps not as completely as what you'd like, but you could do it without encroaching on the front 35 feet. Would you comment on that?
No, our plan is, and we want, right now, we have that 5-foot covered porch that does nothing. It's a cement slab. That is part of what we're including.
Right.
So it's only extra 6 feet. Just to close that in, you're not going to get the kind of space that we're looking for. We have a large family. We entertain our families all from out of town. We have grandchildren. We want to be able to have everybody at our house. And we use the deck.
I do understand. I understand this would be optimal for you, but if there are other alternatives for you, then it's very difficult for us to approve a variance of going forward. And it would seem to me that you could even take the entire section there next to your dining room, which has deck, your deck is L-shaped, and enclose that and get just as much square footage as you get by putting the 6-foot extension past the porch. And while the design might be different, it would seem that it would accomplish everything you're trying to get, including the future laundry. I see that's on the 10th Street.
That was a consideration would be, but losing a third to 40% of that space. So the way, as you can see on the way that the house is currently constructed, that's the covered area to the deck, and that's a real plus for us to be able to have that.
But is it possible you could extend the deck further back in an uncovered area and cover part of the what I'll call the square of the L, the part in the back? In other words, I know that's not your preference, but it seems to me that unless there's some topographical reason.
We can't really extend the deck off the back any further than it already is because we're on a hillside.
Because of
We're
what?
on a hillside, so there's only,
And the hillside goes up or
no,
goes
goes
down?
down. We overlook the Mitsubishi dealership.
I'm back to my 10-pound bag, or 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound bag.
That's it.
Yes, please, go right ahead.
Your existing kitchen right now is in the front of the house though, right? Not in the back. So you don't have any plumbing or anything else in the back. Everything's up front. So it'd be like substantially more to try to move the kitchen to the back of the house. Like
Yes,
you'd have to move drain lines, plumbing, you know, you name it, you're moving it. So, okay.
Is it excavated underneath the kitchen?
it is.
Yes.
It is that cement.
And
It's like-
under that deck
it's like an
area,
unfinished.
that's also,
That's kind
I
of
assume it's up
unfinished.
off the ground somewhere?
Yes.
It's an,
I'm sorry.
it's an unfinished,
Yeah.
portion of our basement.
So you do have access. If you wanted to switch to plumbing, you have access underneath it. It's not digging, because right now, you're gonna have to dig to put, you have your sink in the front that would be in your front yard right now. So you're gonna have to dig for plumbing anyhow. It's not like you're putting your sink in the same place that it was. You are actually recreating all different kinds of plumbing. You have your range all out of your kitchen now. You have your refrigerator, which I'm sure you're gonna have an ice maker. You have a sink here, you have a dishwasher here, and you have a 10-foot island, along with all the others. I look at the pantry, it's 5 foot by 4. I can tell you from last time in my house, having a kitchen, having a small cupboard for stackable laundry, you're gonna find it not totally what you want, because you get all kinds of clothes, but hey, that's your choice. But I do believe that, you're gonna have to do plumbing anyhow, so as much as that would be a cost to you, you're still gonna have to have that cost related into your construction. Where if you did want to put it in the back, you do have access from underneath, which to me would be easier than digging.
I'm not sure, yeah, I'm not sure if we can just dispute that. I think that the purpose is to be able to build this on the front and we have to sacrifice the ability to be able to have a covered area.
First of all, I'd like to say that I think the survey that you brought does, in my mind, take care of the side yard issue, I would think. It may still need a variance, but it's not significant. The thing that I keep coming back to is on your application, you had to answer 5 questions. And one of them says, is the hardship created by the applicant or is his or her predecessor's own action? In other words, are you causing your own hardship? Needing to put that out there. And that's where I'm really wrestling, because I think, well, I understand you want to do that. I mean, I certainly understand that from your standpoint, but from the standpoint of the zoning regulations, we really can't give variances if there's other alternatives that are equally that are feasible. I mean, we're somewhat restricted in that area. And again, I'm a little concerned about altering the neighborhood in that it is the only house that has that extension, or would have that extension going out from the house. And even though you're at an end, and I understand that, while we don't deal with precedents, the next neighbor 3 houses down will say, well, look, we got that one, and you know, and it mushrooms.
Would there be?
I'm really wrestling with that.
So is it a question of any variance at all, or is it a question of if it's not 6 foot, instead it's 5 foot? Or add one to the add one in front of the slab.
Obviously, there's no question you can cover in your porch. I think that would be a simple if a variance is needed, it's simple. Past that, you get into this, is it essential? Is it created by you? Is there a possibility the property can be developed by you in a different way that will allow it to happen?
What do you think?
I'm just trying to be honest.
Well, in my view, the issue is that the house is, these are built, what, 55 or 65? The kitchen's in the front. A lot of people come to us to expand the size of their kitchen and do interior renovations. The problem is if you wanted to, the only way for you to expand the size of your kitchen the way you want without encroaching on any of the setbacks is you would completely have to reconfigure the entire interior of the first floor of your house. You would have to reconfigure your deck and your dining room. You probably have to expand your dining room backwards if you want to keep the same size. As you know, the staff pointed out, you'd have to redo all the plumbing. So while I understand, the 5 questions that must be answered, I also think there has to be a reasonableness element to this. Is it reasonable for us to say that any alternative is an alternative that must be pursued as reasonable, such as reconfiguring the entire first floor, main floor of your home? I would think that probably not. I am not a fan of granting variances into the front yard. I don't recall even having one on the board since I've been on. They've mostly been side and rear yard encroachments. I mean, this does present that as kind of a unique situation. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to vote on this, but I do think that there are considerations that are in your favor, and there are considerations that are not.
The Shelton house on our left is about a foot, a little bit over a foot further out than our porch patio, the slab patio.
So they're closer to the street actually than we are.
Well, all those setbacks were imposed by an ordinance long after those homes were built, so that's the reason why your side yard is now 7.5 feet from the property line. So
and that's the reason why he needed a side yard setback too with the new addition building.
okay. Any other questions or comments from board members?
I understand him to say we need the side yard setback.
If the addition went on, yes.
Even though the rest of the house.
Because because that's non-conforming with the way the house was built. So now you're adding onto the house with a new section. So yes, you would need a side yard setback.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
following up on Mr. Post's comment about the side yard variance, if there is already an established non-conforming line by the existing structure, and what they're proposing is not going to increase that non-conformity, the law is pretty consistent that they're entitled to that variance on the side, as long as they're not otherwise increasing their encroachment.
Yeah, so if we're not further reducing the existing encroachments, it's not really the subject of the variance.
Yes.
So they can extend it, as long as they don't extend it into the side yard any further.
That's, I believe that's the case.
Okay, well, has this been properly advertised?
Yes.
And has it been properly posted?
Yes.
Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to this application? Okay, hearing none, is there anyone here who would like to speak in favor of the application? Hearing none. Okay, we can entertain board comments, motion.
Mr. Regan, I'll move that we approve, let me get the right one here, case applicant 2832 as submitted.
Yes, okay, do we have a second? Okay, so That's except for the side yard variance, which we've come to the conclusion isn't necessary. Right.
Well, I think the board should, we don't know those.
Okay.
It's a separate.
That's the no reason not to put them together. Unless someone wants to see them separate.
I don't see any other separate to listen to it. We already have a motion on the second.
Okay.
Roll call, please.
Cook.
No.
Reagan.
Yes.
Willetts.
Yes.
Stewart.
No.
Duff.
Yes.
Your variance is approved 3-2 by this limit of margin. Congratulations. It expires in 1 year if we don't act on it. Did you need this back? And unless you're in the last case, there's no reason for you to stay. Okay, I know everyone's been waiting patiently for the next application. We've been going for almost 2 hours now, so we're gonna take a brief 5-10 minute recess. We've been drinking water, so you understand what that means.
going on, man.
If we can't see it from the road, it's probably not gonna be
Did you get these for the, Blue Springs app? I don't need these, I need them as part of their record. And add this to the Donald site, this is where you showed you the, Excuse me, we're gonna get started again. Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order for our last case of the evening. It's too early to look here, we can tell. Case number 2834, the applicant is Passivant Memorial Homes. The property in question is 242 Lisa Drive. This is an application to revise or alter the definition of family in the municipal code to include groups of individuals with intellectual and behavioral disabilities living together as a family. Okay, so we see who's here for the applicant. Please state your name and address for the record, and then we'll be sworn in by Ms. Stewart.
Good evening, my name is Ronald Elliott. I'm with the law firm of Dillon, McCandless, King, Coulter, and Graham in Butler, Pennsylvania. I'll be representing the applicant. I'm Bill Shabani with Passavant.
Please step close to the microphone.
Bill Shabani with Passavant. The address is 163 Louisville Road, Warrenville, PA, 15086.
I need to spell
Sherwin, Sherbeonby.
Okay.
Sorry, I have some cases, copies for everyone.
This is what we're doing.
it. Can you raise your right hand so I can swear you in?
I'm not going to be offering testimony. I'll be representing the applicant.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, in the testimony and evidence you are about to present in this case?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, well, before you proceed with, your case, I just want to, confirm with you on the record that the relief you're requesting is as set forth in your application. You want us to, expand or revise the definition of family in the code to include individuals, groups of individuals with intellectual and behavioral disabilities living together as a family.
That's correct, in accordance with the United States Fair Housing Act.
Okay. Well, in that you were asking us to sort of legislatively rewrite the definition of family, have you considered at all perhaps going the curative amendment route, taking this to council?
We have not. We were advised, just by way of background, Passavant has other locations within Bethel Park, 2 others specifically. And those 2 other locations have 4 unrelated individuals with disabilities living as a family. Passavant recently acquired the subject property, and in communication with representatives of the municipality, Passavant indicated its intention to place 4 individuals at this location as a family. We were advised, Passavant was advised that under the current ordinance, only 3 unrelated individuals were permitted. We advised the municipality that under the Fair Housing Act, individuals with disabilities are considered, can be considered a family. So in this case, what you have is 4 individuals that aren't related, that are unrelated, that live as a family, that are being treated differently than what one would consider a traditional family. So the occupancy permit was denied, and the Passavant was instructed to file the application for a variance to secure the occupancy permit. I admit it's a different procedure than probably what you're used to, but that's what we were advised to do.
And just to be clear here, did you say you're seeking a variance or you're seeking the interpretation of the zoning?
So what I said was that Passavant was instructed by the municipality to seek a variance.
So what are you seeking a variance?
We are seeking permission, we are seeking an occupancy permit for the property at issue for 4 individuals that are disabled under the Fair Housing Act that live as a family.
You didn't answer my question. Are you seeking a variance?
We are seeking a variance and or a occupancy permit for this particular unit.
If I may chime in, I know that the application is worded a little differently. They are seeking relief from the definition of a family. That is what we had instructed. So they are looking for relief. The definition says for unrelated people, no more than 3. They have 4 unrelated, so that they're just looking for the relief from that definition to add a 4th person.
And during the pre-application process, was it considered by staff in conversation with the applicant that their use would potentially fit under personal care boarding home?
We did evaluate every use that we do provide in our zoning ordinance. We did look into the Fair Housing Act. It is protected by the Fair Housing Act. So we did evaluate. I can read through the definitions we looked through. The one family dwelling, family, institutional house, nursing home, personal care boarding home, and rest home. Those are the definitions provided, and none of them apply to the use being presented because it is a single family residential dwelling.
We do have these 4 individuals who are unrelated, living in a dwelling together, and there is, I would imagine, there's someone on site 24/7 that provides supervision, helps them with their activities of daily living, et cetera. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Are your facilities like this required to be licensed by the state?
Yes, they are.
Okay, so that satisfies the first part of the definition of personal care boarding home. So it's a state licensed residential facility for adults. Okay, then you provide food, shelter, and personal assistance or supervision provided for a period exceeding 24 consecutive hours for more than 3 adults, but not exceeding 8 adults. Does it fit into that part of the definition? Okay, who are not relatives of the operator. So I imagine none of these folks will be related to the operator, either passive impact or the on-site person.
They are not related.
And who require assistance or supervision in such matters as dressing, bathing, diet, or medication prescribed for self-administration, but do not require hospitalization or care in a skilled nursing or intermediate care facility. Would that accurately describe the kind of residence and treatment that and services are provided in the facility?
I would just add, yes, that's correct, but I would just add, as far as the licensing is concerned, there's separate licensings for personal care homes. We're not licensed as a personal care home. This house will not be licensed as a personal care home. It's licensed as a residential facility for individuals.
Well, I don't think the definition requires it to be licensed as a personal care home. It just said it has to be, it's a state licensed residential facility for adults, which I imagine would also include your use.
Correct, but it's not licensed as a personal care under the 2600 regulations for personal care.
Okay, well, it seems to me that there is another use in our code that this fits under, and it is a personal care boarding home, which is permitted by right in the R4, R5, RT, C1, C2, C3, and C4 districts. It is not permitted in the R1, R2, R3, or the N4 conservation districts. So, in terms of relief requested, again, I go back to whether or not you should potentially go to council for a curative amendment to have them redraft, revise the definition of family, because that's beyond our power and jurisdiction to do so. Or you accept that this fits in with the definition of personal care and boarding home and seek a use variance to allow that. What's this, R2 district? Anybody?
R1.
R1? Okay. Okay. I was asking the staff, I should have made that clear. I apologize. I didn't mean to create a free for all. Okay. So it's an R2 district, which means it would be a use variance in application for this particular property in that district. Which also means that if that would be granted, it would apply to this property and this property only, and we wouldn't be revising the definition of family to apply to all the residential zoning districts. So I think we should try to tailor the remedy, if any, to be site specific, to be property specific, and not change the entire meaning of the code unless council decides that's what they want to do. So you can proceed with your case, but that's where I'm heading with this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Schiavone, can you just give the board a background or a general summary of how the facility at 242 Lisa Drive would be operated?
I can. The Pasadena Memorial Home operates approximately 130 residential group homes within Western Pennsylvania. They're all required to have occupancy permits. They're all fit under family residential stipulations. And so under the Fair Housing Act,
the site that we're looking at is identified as a family residential home. The house operates as a family. The individuals enjoy having a home in the community, being part of the community, in every aspect. We work very hard to become good neighbors for the neighbors that are around the facilities that we have. And there are 24-hour staffing that works with the individuals so that they can enjoy the community just like everybody else can.
Mr. Shabani, I understand that Passavant owns 2 other properties in Bethel Park, is that right?
That's correct. We acquired an agency back in October of 2021 called Southwinds. We were required at that point to get occupancy permits for those 2 sites, all the sites actually, but those 2 sites in particular in the Bethel Park municipality, which we did acquire with permission.
And Mr. Shabani, are those properties located on Prescott Street and Sylvan Street?
That's correct.
And you have 4 individuals with disabilities living in those units?
Yeah.
And would that be the same thing as what is proposed at Lisa Drive?
It is.
Do we know what the zoning classification for those other 2 properties are?
Off the top of my head, I do not.
If you can give me the addresses, I can confirm those.
Do you know the street addresses?
323 so.
I can proceed with the rest of your question.
Those are all the questions I have. If the board has questions for Mr. Shabani, I'm sure he'll be happy to answer them.
Board members, Mr. Coe.
Could you just amplify a little bit of how the home operates? You said that there's someone, a supervisor of some kind that is there. Does that supervisor live in the facility, or are these 8-hour people that come and go, or how does that work?
We have schedules that really are based upon what is called block schedule. So the direct support professionals, what they do is come in for approximately 2.5 days. They'll work there, sleep there, and basically live with the individuals that they're caring for. And we do that for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is that it lessens any type of people coming in and out on a constant basis. So it's more of a family style situation.
Go ahead, Ms. Stewart.
I have a question. I just want to clarify something. On Prescott and Sylvan, you said you have 2 homes, and there are 3 people living in those homes?
There are 4 people in Sylvan and I think currently 3 people in Prescott, if I remember correctly.
And you want how many people in this one over on Lisa?
4 individuals.
And I just don't understand, how do you have 4 individuals in one of them and you didn't have to go through a process here? Because I do believe, didn't you say if there were 3 allowed before you had to do something?
Yeah.
So how does that work?
I couldn't answer the question. We requested an occupancy permit and we were given it.
We're given an occupancy permit for 4 people.
Correct.
But that's what you're fighting for tonight, to have 4 people.
That's correct.
Maybe the borough can explain that.
This was done before I was the planner. We, evaluated the information that is in our zoning ordinance and that was provided to us. We determined that because it was remaining a single-family dwelling use, that they did not need a new certificate of occupancy because initially there were only going to be 3 unrelated people in the home on Lisa Drive. So.
No, I'm talking about the homes that they already have. I mean, they said one of them has 4. So did you say both of them have 4?
One has 4, and I believe currently the one is 3 individuals. However, the other agency that got the original occupancy permit was for 4 people. But we don't, that was approximately 15 years ago.
Just wondering.
But we don't know what they're zoned yet, because they would be allowed as a personal care boarding home, if it's within certain zoning classifications anyhow.
Could you provide clarification? You talked about the support staff living there as well. So in essence, would that be a fifth person living at that place?
They don't permanently live there, they're just spending 2.5 days there with individuals to support.
So 2.5 days is not living there. And then what happens to the other time? Is there other support staff?
There's other DSPs that come in to provide support staff.
The other people are living there the other time.
And for purposes of the record, we used, tell the court reporter what DSP stands for.
Direct support professional.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Duffy.
That's okay. On Lisa Drive, it's a 4-bedroom, but if you have 4 patients living there, plus a staff member living 2.5 days, and other people providing support and living there, where do they live?
There's an area for the DSPs to stay.
Area? Could you be more?
Usually what we do is have a basement area set up for the direct support professionals so that they can sleep there.
So they are living there then?
They're there for 2.5 days, but they do not live permanently.
Okay.
All the other residents that, people that are living there, you're definitely permanent residents, maybe they stay there for.
Yeah, the goal is to have a permanent home for them for the rest of their lives. And the 4 individuals that would be moving in to Lisa Drive already currently live in the community, different community, but they currently live in the community and have been very successful.
As a curiosity, why would you move them?
The current home is a rental, and so we look to provide certainty, more certainty for the individuals who purchase homes.
Has the staff had any success finding the zoning classifications for the other 2 properties?
Yes, 3338 Sylvan and 4708 Prescott are both in the R3 zoning district.
Thank you. Any other questions from board members?
Mr. Regan, in essence, before we go any further, the main crux of our discussion tonight is in fact the definition of family, right?
That seems to be the direction that the application is taking, yes. The request is for, I would imagine, a variance to alter the definition of family and/or issue an occupancy permit, which is something the zoning board never does.
If I ask, are you contending that the staff has misinterpreted the ordinance and has unlawfully narrowly construed the definition of family?
I am advocating and taking the position that your ordinance, your zoning ordinance, must be interpreted in accordance with the Fair Housing Act.
Okay.
And under the Fair Housing Act, individuals with disabilities that live in a home are a family, just like a traditional husband and wife and children. And you cannot treat them differently under the Fair Housing Act. That's what the Act says. That's what the case that I provided says.
Which case was it?
That's the City of Clairton versus Zoning Hearing Board. And the issue there was the same thing. Now, Clairton's ordinance was even more explicit than Bethel Park's, because Clairton said that it defined family much like yours did, but it said and a person with a disability living together shall be considered a family or shall not be disqualified under this ordinance. And specifically, I quote from the case at the bottom of page 4. The Fair Housing Act permits occupancy by persons with disabilities as a single family, and hence it would still be permissible in the R2 zoning district. So even though your ordinance doesn't specifically exempt individuals with disabilities, the Fair Housing Act does. And you can't interpret your ordinance to be in violation of the Fair Housing Act. That's my position.
Appreciate it. We've got the case, so we understand your position.
Could I, for a moment, step aside from this facility? In the last 3 or 4 years, when the fracking was taking place, we've had a number of instances where individual unrelated people decide to rent a house. They might be working together or whatever. This has been, I'll say, controlled in my view by having a maximum of 3 unrelated people. That limits the amount of vehicles that might be at the location. There's all kinds of other considerations, separate from dealing with people that have a disability. Your request to change the definition of family, it would seem, would require us to let any number of people unrelated live in any house. It seems that that's a counterproductive, separate from the Fair Housing Act, it's a counterproductive thing for the municipality.
Well, I would say, respectfully, I would say 2 things about that. One is, in your example, those people do not have disabilities. And
I was saying that, but you wanted to find the term family, which is how you get into a single family dwelling, as no more than 3 unrelated people. Or more than 3 unrelated people, I'm sorry. And it would seem that that opens the door for all of these situations that are not of a concern to you at all, but are of a concern to us.
And I can appreciate that, but again, your example does not concern individuals with disabilities. And the Fair Housing Act recognized that people with intellectual disabilities were historically treated badly, and they were discriminated against, and they were shunned by society. And the Fair Housing Act attempted to remedy that by recognizing that these individuals can live lives just like a traditional family does. And they do. And it's explicitly put into the Fair Housing Act. So I would respectfully say that your example is materially different than what's before.
Then I'm misunderstanding what you're trying to achieve. My understanding from reading this is you wanted to change the definition that the municipality uses for family.
Well, respectfully, the United States Congress already changed it. The United States Congress passed the Fair Housing Act, and it said that individuals with disabilities living as a family cannot be discriminated against. And that's all we were advancing here today. You can't treat individuals with disabilities differently than you treat a traditional family.
Well, if our ordinance does not discriminate against people with disabilities, if homes like Passavant are permitted under the personal care boarding home definition, which is allowed in more than 50% of the zoning districts, how is our ordinance discriminatory?
I didn't say your ordinance was discriminatory. What I said was, if you interpret it to not include individuals with disabilities, as pursuant to the Fair Housing Act, you would be interpreting it as such. That's what I said.
I think at least what I'm saying is, I'm interpreting our definition of personal care boarding home to be consistent with the Fair Housing Act because it doesn't exclude or otherwise prohibit those homes to accommodate the up to 4 individuals that you would seek to service that have intellectual behavior or other quote-unquote disabilities. I think our ordinance does have a more than reasonable accommodation for what you're seeking. And in my view, we're going to ask you, we're not going to vote on this tonight. I'm going to tell you that right now. We're going to ask you to submit as findings of fact and conclusions of law. We want you to state out specifically what relief that you're requesting of us. And if it is a request to essentially revise the definition of ordinance of family, that I think even under the Clairton decision you provide us, you have to admit that's beyond our control. The Clairton case says, the zoning board is not a legislative body and it lacks authority to modify or amend the terms of the zoning ordinance. And if that's what you're asking us to do, in the case you provided, it says that we can't do it.
And all I'm asking you to do is interpret your ordinance consistent with the Fair Housing Act. That's all I'm asking you to do.
And this we'll see when we get your findings and conclusions, and we'll see if you hit the mark.
Very good.
And we would like the findings and conclusions to also address the other available remedies to you. One, going to council with a curative amendment to have a council change the definition rather than us. Or accept the fact that your use fits within the definition of personal care boarding home. And then in the R2 district, you apply for a use variance applicable to your property and your property only.
I appreciate that guidance, and I will certainly do that.
Okay, we are not done yet, of course. We have a number of people here, as you can see. Let me see. Is that the conclusion of your case in chief?
Yes.
Okay. Everybody who desires to testify, I ask you to stand up and raise your right hand. Everybody.
Got everybody? Okay, everybody standing with their right hand. Okay, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the testimony and evidence you are about to present in this case? Yes. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to do this in a somewhat orderly fashion. So we're going to start on the left. We're going to start with the municipality first. My apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
Unless that microphone there works, you can get that one up.
I got a big voice. Thank you, Mr. Green. The municipality is not in favor of the variance in case number 2832 that is requesting an allowance of one additional unrelated person to live at the property of 242 Lisa Drive. This is the municipality's official stance. Thank you.
Okay, before we start on, so we're going to start on the left. We're going to start with Fort Clark Royal and work our way back. Go ahead, since you're seated.
Before we start, are we using a timer?
Okay, name and address for the record, please.
Caitlin Harper, 236 Lisa Drive.
Okay, say it again and slow down.
Caitlin Harper, 236 Lisa Drive.
Okay. Hey, could you spell your last name, please?
Harper, Carper. For starters, it's come to my attention that Robert Hicks himself said 24/7 care facilities couldn't operate in an R2 zone to begin with. There are other properties he mentioned shouldn't even be there. You can't do anything site-specific because it's considered spot zoning, which is illegal. The Fair Housing Act doesn't give a number, so we don't know if it's more than 5 or any number at all. Passman told the borough, Kristen Prim here specifically, who told us there wouldn't be any care whatsoever at the home. But their attorney, not that one, along with more than a handful of their own employees, as well as those people who would be there. Not to mention the flyers all around the town advertising for the job. I find it very hard to believe 3 disabled individuals are allowed to be left in a home with no supervision. Secondly, the definition of family which I've provided says spouses, domestic partners, children, biological, adopted, foster, or stepchild
parents and a legal guardian, or spouses, parents, and siblings. This does not vary between any federal government website you search. But according to Paxman, this definition is discriminating. But it's not. It's a simple fact of what a family is defined as. The line between actual discrimination and imagined discrimination is constantly being blurred. The instances of actual discrimination, we should come together to condemn those acts and fight to fix the wrongs caused by them. The problem in American society today is the definition of discrimination is being redefined to tailor to certain agendas. These agendas aim to broaden the definition of discrimination to include actions and ideas that are not traditionally seen as discriminatory. By doing so, discrimination can be claimed more frequently to justify perceived injustices and difficulties. The narrative has now become, if you disagree with me, you're discriminating against me. No one is barring a residential owner who has a disability from living there with his or her biological family. There is a discrimination against a single person in the definition of a family. It's a law to uphold the current zoning where it's allowed. What Passman is trying to do is loophole the situation by asking for a change in definition of family in order to not need a rezoning. Third, having a revolving door next to us is devaluing my home after I put a large sum of money into fixing it up. No matter what type of people live in the house, residential neighborhoods desire consistent home ownership, not a revolving rental community with people constantly coming and going. If I put my house up for sale and you're aware that a group home is next door, please raise your hand if you're going to buy my house at full market value. We aren't discriminating. We're angry at the fact that Paxman thinks they are above the law and not required to follow the rules, or thinks they can change them when they want to fit their agenda. If a normal resident owner bought the home, we wouldn't even be standing here today. There aren't members of the community. They aren't members of the community. We are. We are the taxpayers, and we are people that are going to be here long term, who are living in this neighborhood and sending our kids to school there. The question to the board that I have for the board is, if they keep claiming they're protected under the Fair Housing Act, what am I protected under? I'm asking you to please use this opportunity to show us that we have rights to and stand up for us.
Please hold your applause and keep moving. The gentleman who's in the front row, or whoever wants to. And as I stated at the top of the hearing, anything that is repetitive, redundant, irrelevant, they're not relevant to the actual issues at hand, we don't have to entertain.
Karen Hatfield, 248 Lisa Drive. Hatfield.
And we have a letter on record from you, correct?
Correct. Okay, I just have a few points I'd like to make, and also just a few questions. Passman is citing the Clairton lawsuit as precedent. The Clairton lawsuit was quite different. Clairton was trying to change their zoning laws. They already had a nonprofit church in the area. The church was converted to a group home. Clairton was trying to keep a group home out. That is why it was more discriminatory. Bethel Park R2 is a long-established zoning law written specifically to keep the area strictly residential. No churches, no nonprofits, no businesses. The second point is, recently the Supreme Court ruled against the EPA versus West Virginia. The ruling states that federal agencies do not have the authority to change or write law. This applies to all federal agencies. Passman is using the FHA in their argument. We want to mention that there is nothing in the FHA law that makes local zoning laws discriminatory. 3, why was Passman permitted to purchase this home knowing their intentions and zone restrictions? Zoning changes are made for the good of the area as a whole. So here's my questions. What area does this affect, since only a few homeowners were notified? If our zone is R2, what houses are affected? What streets are affected? You mentioned a personal care home, then changing it to a personal care home for this specific house. But I'm talking about the R2 zone. What area is that actually affecting? How many group homes can be placed in an area? Nonprofits, we all know, are exempt from taxes. This is a loss of tax revenue and will eventually be placed on other homeowners. Can you assure us that Passman will pay property and school taxes? We are respectfully demanding the council deny Passman's request for R2 zoning modifications because we believe Passman is a nonprofit operating as a business and does not meet the definition of residential. while they say that they're, it's a violation of the Fair Housing Act, these people are paying Passavant to take care of them. This is a business, a nonprofit operating as a business.
I appreciate that point of view, but how they act as a nonprofit, and whether or not this is operated as a business, is not relevant to the issue at hand as to whether or not we should change our definition of family in the zoning ordinance to accommodate what they want to do. Who's next, please?
I'll go next. This will be short and quick, and hopefully we get some answers here. My name is Casey Parker, CARPER, 236 Lisa Drive, obviously Bethel Park. I'm confused here why we're having a question of you're not allowed to have a medical assistant in R2, and we're still sitting here as 3 or 4 people. It's a medical facility, shouldn't be operated as is. Can we respond to that? It's 240. It shouldn't be permitted in things.
I don't know why it was. In our definition of family, you can have up to 3 unrelated people living together and they'd be considered a family. Their application wants to expand that to 4, and they also seem to want us to incorporate the entire Federal Housing Act as well. My point is that in my view, and the case that they provided specifically states that we don't have jurisdiction or authority or power to revise the zoning ordinance. If they want the zoning ordinance definition of family changed, they have to go to council and file something that's called a curative amendment. Or their other alternative is to accept, that this fits under the definition of personal care boarding home, which is good and bad because it allows them to have up to 8.
Right, so my question is, what are we sitting here pondering because it's an R2 zone? So they're not allowed to have 3 people, whether roommates, family, whatever you want to call it. They answered the question, it's 24-hour medical facility in R2 zone, which isn't allowed, period. Whether you have 1 person, 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, we can sit up here and talk what's a family, and by the federal government, it's defined, that was already mentioned. Nothing about the Fair Housing Act, so what would we be talking about? We could save everyone a lot of time here if we just said, you're not allowed to operate in R2. The zone says it. That's not discriminative. You should have done your research before you purchased the house, rather than come up here, waste everyone's time, waste your time. We have a room full of people to go here, and we're talking about 3 or 4 people running a business that we already told is not allowed to operate there. And one question, why doesn't the borough know about the other ones? Because we're playing these family games. We're saying they're roommates, and we're loopholing what's actually going on. Thanks for verifying that the other 2 are in the proper zone. This one's not. Thank you.
Name and address, please.
Jerome Trex, 249 Lisa Drive.
I need to make that.
Jerome Trex, Tresch. My question is about that house over on Sylvan. You said it was an R3 zoning district, and what is that classified as?
The property on Sylvan is a single-family dwelling.
Single-family dwelling. Being that it's in R3 zoning, is it permitted to have 4 non-related individuals?
I don't know how many people currently reside there. They said one of them has 3, one of them has 4. So I don't know how many are there.
Okay, if that one had 4, and this one is, you guys are permitted to have 4, as long as it's with a single family dwelling, then they will do what they want. But if it stays as a medical facility, isn't there a rule about 3,500 feet radius?
Again, for purposes of the application and what the issues are, a 3,500-foot radius isn't relevant because no one has accepted what I said before. That's a personal. It could fit under the definition of personal care boarding home. As for the Sylvan property, the testimony was that either has 3 or 4. It probably had 4 at some point. They recently bought that property and bought out, I guess, a smaller player in the market.
But the reason I'm asking is because if the variance passes, or if council changes, amends the wording of the zoning to single family dwelling with 4 people, we have no recourse whatsoever.
Well, your recourse will be with council if this would go through a curative amendment, if they apply for that. Because then there will be hearings just like this about the curative amendment. Everything has to be done out in the open and in public.
Thank you.
My name is Darrell Taggart, I live at 255 Lisa Drive, that's Taggart. As I understand, this meeting is about Pasadena Memorial Homes and Winnie Buffett Park to change their definitions and laws so they can operate their facility in an R2 residential zone. They purchased a $440,000 home knowing that they currently do not meet the R2 zoning criteria. Did Pasadena Memorial Homes have some reassurance that the Bethel Park Borough was not going to object to the facility when they paid the exorbitant amount for the home? If this variance gets approved, it will appear as though it was a done deal before the purchase. A zoning change such as this would be a prime example of spot zoning, the very antithesis of Bethel Park's plan zoning. I feel our council and local government are not enforcing the zoning laws the municipality has in place. Just because there are other group homes in Bethel Park does not make it right to permit this assisted living facility in this tightly populated community. This 24/7 staffed medical facility should be rightly placed in an R4 or R5 zone. Pasadena's justification for this definition change is based on someone's opinion of what was written and how it is interpreted. Regardless of how many cases, these interpretations are not always correct and are supposed to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. If the group home is allowed, any property owners in the neighborhood that would want to sell could see a significant loss in value. Is there a study of how this would affect surrounding property values? There will be an increase in traffic on all the streets that lead to or intersects Lisa Drive. We've had an influx of young families moving into our neighborhood. People leisurely walk and jog on our streets day and night, and many walk their dogs. Was there a traffic study done to see how this group home and the services it requires will impact the neighborhood? Pasadena Memorial Homes lists the individuals who live in their facilities as those with intellectual disabilities, autism, and behavioral health needs. We are now hearing they include those with drug and alcohol addiction issues. My concern is for the safety of my wife, daughter, and granddaughter, and I know our neighbors have the same concerns for their families as well. There are neighbors who now speak to installing security systems, while others talk of moving out of the community altogether. I've lived here since 1987. We have a great neighborhood. We have a safe neighborhood. Whether you think this facility would have an impact to our community or not, we know it certainly will. Thank you.
Okay, my speech is 3 minutes long, so I practiced behind it.
Okay, name and address for the court reporter, please.
I will, but I just wanted you to know, and it's for documentation as well. My name is Lisa Carter. I live at 3315 Hill Road. Just spell the last name. C-A-R-P-E. And spell the street name. A-P-P-E-L. July 2nd, at 11:45 a.m., I went to 4659 Norma Drive. I spoke with an employee working at the home. Employee said she works for Pasadena Homes. I asked if this was a 24/7 assisted care home. She said yes. She called her supervisor to get a contact number since no one returns my call from Pasadena. It's verified I was there. She said they are relocating the home. The variance application verifies they are relocating this 24/7 care home to Lisa Drive. Per Kirsten Ford's June 7th email at 1:45 p.m. saying no full-time nursing care is false information.
Now, 2 employees at Passman, attorney Andrea Parenti, all say it's 24/7 care. So are all the other homes in Bethel Park. We verified that with neighbors. We have all evidence to prove Passman operates a 24/7 care home. Robert Hicks with Vince Kelly as a witness said if it's a 24/7 care, they will not allow it. Passman purchased April 18th, applied for a variance June 3rd, signage should post June 16th to the 23rd, was not posted till June 27th. There was only one sign. The website says 4 signs should post. Why not only 4? Not 4. Friday, June 30th, I asked Lawrence Christian to see Passman's occupancy permit. He said they do not have one. My research shows it's against the law to rent to others without a CO. Why do they not have one to this date? Passman is not following the proper guidelines according to your website. Low-income housing refers to residents or individuals of low families with low annual household income. These houses programs are privately, state, or federally operated. Passman is a low-funded housing business. This falls in the neighborhood housing rule law that now protects suburban homeowners. While spot zoning creates a great benefit for the owner of the rezoned property, it does not accompany a benefit to the community or public. This may well be illegal. If spot zoning provides a service needed in the community, it's a benefit to the landowners. It may be profit. Passman does not benefit any of the resident owners in the R2 zone, making this spot zoning illegal. Question number 4 on the variance application absolutely alters the neighborhood. I submitted a copy of the article to the zoning board, and I have one here on July 23rd. It was announced. HUD terminated the Obama ERA AFFH rule. The rule was replaced with the new preserving community and neighborhood choice rule. This protects our fair housing rights. We presented you proof with this home is operating 24/7, which falls in the R4 zoning, which makes it illegal in our zone. Stop spot zoning this home, it's illegal. HUD has eliminated the AFH rule. This also favors our neighborhood. Thank you. I just took care of your sentences and then it started. That's fine.
Okay, I'll ask for who's next now. We'll ask you to please be kind to our board and try to keep up. So let's not try to break the land speed record.
Anyone else want?
My name is Tracy Kasevich, K-A-S-I-E-V-I-C-H, and I live at 3344 Appel, A-P-P-E, Road.
And Tracy, how do you spell?
T-R-A-C-Y. I'll just be quick. Basically, as far as under the Disability Act that they're requesting, just to clarify, I think this has been said before, but groups of individuals recovering from addiction to drugs and alcohol qualified as disabled under the Fair Housing Act and will qualify as a family entitled to occupy a single-family dwelling. Of course, that's a huge concern for me. We do live in a wonderful neighborhood. We've been here for 15 years. Probably never heard from me before because there's really never any issues, and I do appreciate that. But the problem too is if you do allow them to have this variance, they're asking for 4, but I thought I heard someone say it could be up to 8. So therefore, you have a single house that now has 4 to 8 people living in it, 4 bedrooms. That's it. Now I have other staff members 24/7 that are also living in this house in the basement apparently. So from being at this meeting, I've learned that you like to ask if there's alternative plans. So I would like to ask Passman, what are there other alternatives for these people that are going to be living in this house? I would think that there is, and what would be the hardship? So I'm sure most people here could think that there are other alternatives than Lisa Drive. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hello, my name is Phil Kurtz. I live at 3357 R Road. KURT. I'm here to voice my concern and opinion related to the variance for 242 Lisa by Passman Memorial Homes.
I ask that the zoning commission deny Passavant's application for a variance. Passavant is asking to change the definition of a family to allow for individuals with intellectual and behavioral disabilities to live together as a family. I emailed Robert Hicks and Kristen Prim to ask some questions regarding the variance application. Kristen responded and stated that the application is not to change the definition, but to allow for unrelated persons to live together in the house. There is enough of a difference between Passavant's application and Bethel Park's interpretation to deny this application until sides can agree on what their variance should be. Secondly, I understand Passavant's intention is to have these people, individuals, live in the house without not living care, that there will be 24-hour care provided by Passavant. This sounds more like a personal care boarding home. I won't dwell on it because we've talked about that, but it's 69.8.99 in Bethel Park's code. Bethel Park currently allows for this type of housing in R5 and RT zoning. I asked why didn't Passavant purchase a house in those zones? I state that poor due diligence on their part to research the zoning rules does not mean we should just allow for a variance to fix a problem that wasn't there prior to their purchase of that house. My third concern is related to my research on Passavant online. Currently, there are 2 negative reviews on Better Business Bureau's website, both within the last year, that state that management at Passavant has repeatedly ignored issues brought by consumers with allegations of misconduct, physical altercations, and even sexual misconduct by Passavant staff of Passavant. While these are just allegations, there has been no response from Passavant related to these complaints on the BBB stuff. Why would Bethel zoning allow for a variance until Passavant can address these allegations? Again, I request that the zoning board deny the variance for Passavant Memorial Homes for 242 East Drive. Thank you for your attention. And who would like to be next?
Happy Tuesday evening, everyone. My name is Alex Roblicki, 244 Boss Road, Bethel Park.
Spell your last name, please.
Sure, certainly. W-R-O-B as in boy, L-I-C-K-Y. I am here to speak, I would like to make an allegation. Of course, an allegation, you don't have to prove that it's true, but I allege, based on what I've heard here, that Passavant, as a nonprofit corporation, made a mistake in purchasing this home in an R2 zone, where they should have bought R3, R4, or R5, in which this type of home is allowed. So it's not a question of discrimination, because Bethel Park is not discriminating. They just purchased it incorrectly and poorly. Now, I'm going to make that allegation based on my profession as a professional realtor and as a professional residential redeveloper. I have sold 243 Lisa in my neighborhood, which is right across the street. The price for that home sale was $342,000. It had luxury vinyl tile. It was completely redone in the basement, and the upstairs was updated, and the floors were in very good hardwood floors were redone in good condition. That house sold at $342,000. Okay. I attempted to purchase 242 to redevelop it, to ironically possibly renovate it so that my mother could live in the neighborhood. However, I was outbid in that price. I did ARV, which is an after repair value assessment of that home. It would sell for $400,000, maybe $405,000, maybe $410,000. If I did over $100,000 of work, there was major structural issues in the basement. There was a lot of work that needed to be done in that home, plus about a $30,000 tree removal in the front. And then the neighbors here know all of that, if they could speak to that. So basically, I bid in at $205,000, and that was at my max number where I was comfortable figuring I'd have to put in at least $100,000, then have carrying costs with a quick sell, maybe make about 50 to 60, which is a 20% markup in profit. I was shocked well, first of all, let me back up. When they listed it at $385,000, I thought that was a good job because you might be able to drive the market up to about $400,000. When I saw the sale value at $440,000 cash, I was shocked. Not that I don't want those homes to be worth that much since I live in the neighborhood, but it's just an overpaid on that home, which means the corporation, my allegation, the corporation was rushed. They needed homes. They weren't thinking clearly. They bought the home, and now they want to clean up the trash and have you guys just brush it through. So they got a lawyer in here talking about fair housing, which which honestly, I'm not going to go because it's beyond all of our level, but I'll just say this. I believe governance, subsidiarity, thank you, subsidiarity, issues should be handled locally. The idea that they're going to come in here and throw federal law into our communities, I think that's wrong. And I commend you guys for your position and what you said, and I hope you guys, you know you have my support in the community to stick to it on this one. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name's Phyllis Pecina, P-E-C-I-N-A. I live at 5524 Annetta Drive. I've been a Bethel Park resident since 1966. And number one, when they say Passivant is a nonprofit, they tell me Blue Cross is a nonprofit, and the CEO is named $2 million. Everybody that works there gets paid. And I don't want the government or Fair Housing Act to tell me what a family is. A family is not with paid employees. And I have relatives who work for places like Passivant. They have nothing but problems with the employees. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the handicapped, the mentally. I've worked with them. I give my heart to them. But you don't move into a residential area and make the people feel for walking their children in there, because they do have problems. And I know what a family is. I'm a grandmother and a great-grandmother, and I have love for my whole family, and nobody pays me to watch my grandchildren. Those poor people are paying all along the line of Passivant. The people are getting paid. I don't think this is right. Keep it in your hearts and your minds. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Jennifer Hopwood, Hopwood. I reside at 3350 Uphill Road. I'm a single mom of two young boys. Their ages are 11 and 6. My backyard meets the backyard of the house that is in question. I have concerns about safety. I have concerns about traffic. I don't know that if this facility would move in with the people coming in and coming out, could I even allow my children to play in the backyard without my supervision? This is not the place for this housing. It needs to go in the proper zoning, and our neighborhood is not it. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's move on to the right side of the room now. Who wants to go first? And if you hesitate, I'm going to take that as an implication that you're done and we can all go home. Okay, go right ahead. Name and address, please.
Sharon Janosik, Janosik, 4314 Anna Street. Anna, A-N-N-A. Thank you. I advocate for people with disabilities. I advocate with their families. I advocate with them, in their families, in their schools, and in their communities. I'm frankly stunned and astonished at what I'm hearing tonight. It's extremely disappointing and disheartening. People who have disabilities and live in a community living home, which is what this is called. A community living home is not a medical facility. That has a different legal definition. There's a different legal definition for personal care and boarding. That is its own thing. These are all separate things. They are not decisions that you can just make up and decide what something is. People with disabilities have every right and every ability to live life in a community setting. That's why it's a community home. They are not people to be afraid of. They are people who have autism or Down syndrome or intellectual disabilities. They are my friends. I have friends who live in community living homes. homes. Many of my friends have children who live in community living homes. They are great neighbors. They are great members of the community. No one needs to be afraid of them. And if it helps you with traffic, I'm assuming that none of the four of them can drive, so none of them have cars. And it's really only the people who are coming in to help them live in their home in the community. That's probably less cars than you would have with a sixth family member home in the community. And I agree that this is way over everybody's heads. And this essentially is going to go to a team of lawyers who specialize in disability rights, in access rights, and in civil rights. Because the Fair Housing Act basically says that you cannot treat people with disabilities who by nature of their disability must live together, and they do already live together and function as a family, any different than you would treat any other family. I really think you just bought yourselves a great time defending that. And I agree with the petitioner in their attempt to get you to look at your regulation in terms of the Fair Housing Act. But since that's not what happened, then I think the judge will need to do. Thank you.
I should have been clear. We were on those who were opposed to the application. Please hold the applause. It's late enough as it is. And then after we finish everyone who's opposed, then we usually go into those who are in favor of the application. So I just want to make that ground rule clear. In terms of whether or not we've bought ourselves a lawsuit, you hopefully heard our direction to the applicant that they are to submit us findings of fact and conclusions of law. We have our own solicitor. We're aware of what the Fair Housing Act implications are. But as you may have also heard, we as the zoning board cannot rewrite the definition of family. If that's what they want us to do, is to write something, interpret it, it means something that it does not, they have to go to council for a curative amendment. At least that's my position. Okay, who's next?
I'm Michelle Friday, just like the day of the week. It's 3273 Appel, A-P-P-E-L Road, about Michelle. Oh, M-I-C-H-E-L-E. Thank you. And I'm not going to take a lot of time here because I don't want to piggyback on anything anybody said. I agree with Sharon in regards to, we are advocates for people with special needs. I am an advocate for people with special needs. It doesn't mean that this violates the Fair Housing. Under the Fair Housing Act, it states to refuse to make reasonable accommodations in land use and zoning policies and procedures where such accommodations may be necessary to afford, persons or groups with disabilities an equal opportunity to use and enjoy housing. What constitutes a reasonable accommodation is a case-by-case determination. Not all requested modifications of the rules are reasonable. That's straight from the Fair Housing Act. In the 1995 Supreme Court opinion and dissent in the city of Edmonds versus Oxford House Incorporated, both the majority opinion and the dissenting opinion states that certain conditions must be reviewed under the Fair Housing Act, but it did not decide whether the ordinance was actually violated. That goes back to local municipalities and is oftentimes misconstrued by people that the Fair Housing Act is already settled law. Pasadena Memorial Homes bought the house and then ex post facto applied for a variance in a zone already under an R2 status. They knew this when they bought the house. Bethel Park has created plentiful zones that meet an R4 criteria, which has a mix of apartments, single-family residence, and group homes, thus meeting the parameter of the Fair Housing Act. I'm gonna not read my last paragraph, it's kind of redundant, so I'm just going to say, therefore, the criteria of reasonable accommodations by this locality has been met, and the variance should be denied based on it being a based on it being a self-inflicted hardship, not one caused by something.
Anyone else? Okay, hearing none. We've already went through is anyone else who wants to speak in favor of the application? Okay. We have asked the applicant to provide us with findings and fact and conclusions of law that will go through all of these legal issues and apply them to the facts of the case. In that you are collectively are not represented, you would have the opportunity to do the very same. So we would have two opposing viewpoints, two findings, two conclusions of law, two viewpoints to consider. I would strongly recommend that you do that. If you don't, that's obviously your choice. But we've asked that they have them submitted within 15 days before our next meeting, which is August 1st. The municipality will make everyone aware of when those are filed, that you will have access to that. So you can see what is submitted by the applicant. And with that,
Mr. Regan, can you pin down the due date for those findings and conclusions? August 1st is our next meeting. 2 weeks prior to that will be the 18th, Monday, the 18th of July.
let's do it the Friday before that.
Like the 15th of July, that would only give them 8 or 9 days.
Yes, it would be my request that we postpone it another month. I'd like an opportunity to have the court reporter prepare the transcript, which is going to take a little bit of time.
I see no reason why we would not grant that request. We will answer your questions. I'm just gonna.
Yeah, I can do that too.
Okay, please, we're not gonna get into a shouting match and start having arguments here. We're trying to run a meeting. He's the applicant, and he wants to delay, he wants to postpone another month. I don't see how that harms or prejudices anyone. We haven't made a decision on that yet. I will ask that you come to the microphone next.
I would just like to know how we're going to be notified. Will it be by letter, email, another small sign in front of their yard?
It will not be a small sign on anybody's yard. Everyone who has signed up to be here this evening, everyone who has submitted a written letter, everyone who's provided testimony will get notification of this being filed. I would ask the municipality that, I don't know if we can do this, but we put it on the municipality's website. They can just download it and read it at their convenience. Or does it have to be emailed? And that's up to you.
I don't know, I'm not sure.
We'll just email it out.
In the alternative, Mr. Regan, if people who want notice of the findings and conclusions that the applicant has filed with the board, give us your email.
I just wanted to know that the next hearing would be.
I'm sorry, I'm not finished. Anybody who wants to receive copies of the findings and conclusions can give us their email. We'll create a distribution list for that, and everybody will get a copy of that. And as Mr. Regan has suggested, he's recommended that you perhaps might want to file your own findings and conclusions, and you would have the option to do that as well. And so you might even want to hire an attorney to do that, because there's a very specific issue about the Fair Housing Act. They contend is the decisive issue. That's what they say. So you might want to get an attorney and speak to that issue.
I was just asking when the next meeting will be to vote on this decision.
All right, well, the applicant has asked for, to have this pushed out 1 month, which would be September. I guess Labor Day is the 5th, would probably be the 6th. September 6th. If we grant the extension, which there's no reason why we would not, it would be September 6th. That's another Tuesday. If it's in August, it'll be August 1st.
petition, I'm sorry. Caitlin Berger, and again, was that email, was it paper letter, no answer?
Okay, you were speaking when the solicitor was trying to explain that. As the solicitor was attempting to explain, he just asked everyone who wants it by email, leave your email address.
He said it, so if we
We'll
wanted to
compile a
find-
distribution
I
list.
said I wanted to know when the next meeting was and how we were gonna be notified by that for the meeting, not the distribution list. I could care less about the distribution list. I'm asking, how am I going to be notified for the next meeting to vote on this? Email, letter, what?
Are all the meetings posted on the website?
Yes.
Every meeting is posted on the website for every
Okay, that's
municipal
all.
body.
All right, since they answered their,
Wait, name, I can't
my name's
remember.
Casey Carver,
Carver.
Carver, C-A-R-P-E-R. My question is, since they answered their own question, and you guys kind of answered their question, that, again, it's a medical facility in the R2 zone, until it's determined whether we're moving forward or not, is it safe to assume that they're not allowed to occupy the house regardless with 3 people until this is passed?
That's the question.
Because you guys just answered the question here in zoning, we spent 3 hours sitting here, and you guys literally sat up there and said, R2 zone is not allowed, and then we're just back here on the Ferris wheel talking about family. So until it's ruled out, or is it safe to assume that they're not allowed to operate that house with the business that they intended and, provided to you guys, being that it's not allowed in R2 zone currently? Until it's overturned, I believe that they shouldn't be allowed to, as it's clearly written in the zoning laws, and until that's proven to be discriminatory, they shouldn't be allowed to operate there. Can you answer the question?
Well, no decision has been made as to whether or not, one, it's a medical care facility, 2, whether it's prohibited in the R2. It'd be prohibited in the R2 if it fits under the definition of a personal care boarding house. If that's the conclusion that we reach or that they agree to, then it would be prohibited in the R2.
I also think the ones that they're operating right now, that they also self-identified, are operating outside of the permitted zones as well. So is there a cease and desist on those locations?
That's not our jurisdiction, is to do cease and desist on operating business. That's a.
But you don't have documentation in your borough. Kirsten doesn't even have documentation for that, so we're gonna expect.
All right, we're not gonna start arguing with the staff now.
Yeah, this is not before us tonight. This is a quasi-judicial body.
So let's vote and decide that while we're all here, instead of going to the behind closed doors.
You're gonna have to listen to us. This is a quasi-judicial body. We are only allowed to consider the case in front of us. This body does not have the ability to issue cease and desist orders.
Well, it can't enforce an R2 zone.
Please, I can't get both of you at one time.
I'm not
If you just
finished.
sit down, we'll file a motion that they're saying.
Yeah, just
they're
leave
not
it
gonna
back.
do it. We'll be here at the next meeting too. Put our application in for that. Okay. Lisa Carter. Lisa Carter, C-A-R-P-E-R. Okay, 2 things. First of all, I want it to be known that my brother is legally deaf. So he is a handicapped person, okay? Totally deaf. And he was not discriminated when he purchased his home as a homeowner living in his home. There's a difference from that Fair Housing Act, from a person that is living in the home as the homeowner versus a business coming in there. Second of all, I have a question that I would like to be answered. Every one of us people had to raise our hand. The attorney did not. Why didn't he have to raise his hand to swear under the oath? That is a very good question. I would like answered.
Attorneys don't provide testimony.
Well, he was answering though.
He was asking questions of his client.
He was stating their legal position. Any facts that he remarked on, we'll get a transcript, and if it's the attorney speaking, then they don't count. But it's only the witness whose testimony counts. There will be a transcript, and you can look at it, and if you see something the attorney said you don't agree with, well, we're not going to consider that because that's not evidence.
No, I understand that, a person should still raise their hand and look you in the eyes. That Ms. Pearson does not look at me when I talk to her. She doesn't even, Mr. Walker Hicks, that's another thing I would like to.
Okay, none of this is relevant to anything we're considering tonight. Your personal issues with Kirsten or with Mr. Hicks or anything.
It's She works, this is her department, so she should be able to talk to any of us at any time, and everyone protects her, and I cannot talk to her. I don't understand why. So,
I'm just Karen Hatfield, 248 Lisa Drive. I just had a question. I just wanted a clarification, because Mr. Reagan, you said they could apply as a personal care home at that specific address. So does that mean if they?
There is a definition in our ordinance called personal care boarding home, which we went through on the record, clause by clause, and I asked the applicant if all of these activities that are in this definition fit with what they would do in the property, and he said yes to every one of them. The only difference is that definition allows up to 8 people. That use is allowed in R4, R5, RT,
Okay.
the C1 through 3, and I think that's it. Not allowed in R1, 2, 3, or the industrial manufacturing district or the conservation district.
Okay, but you specifically said you can apply for an exemption at 242 Lisa Drive as a boarding home. Would that mean?
If they accept that definition, and if they filed an application for a use variance, they can apply for a use variance for this property as a personal care boarding home. And then a use variance has different legal standards than a dimensional variance.
So it's possible they could get approved as applying for a boarding home, but a personal care home has to have 4, and Mr. Rudolph just mentioned that they were only approved for 3, so it wouldn't qualify as a boarding home.
I don't know what they're approved for. The applicant testified just that one of them currently only has 3 residents.
No, he said they applied for an occupancy
For this property, for the Lisa Drive
and
property.
Mr. Rudolph said they were not approved, they were only approved for 3, is that correct?
I didn't testify to what they were approved for. The variance request is from 3 to 4.
And you denied it?
I didn't deny anything. I gave a stance. I don't make decisions.
Oh, okay, I thought you,
That was,
it
no,
was
no, that
recommended
was,
that you deny?
that was a municipality stance.
That it stay
Against-
against it,
Against
okay.
4.
That's essentially what the applicant is asking for. They want us to amend the definition of family to include, to bump it up to 4. And I'm assuming also incorporate all this fair housing stuff.
Okay, but he said they're recommending that it stay at 3. And if it's at 3, it doesn't qualify as a personal care home, because you have to have a minimum.
Mr. Rudolph testified that the municipality's official position is that they are opposed to the application.
Correct. So that means they were opposed to it going to 4. So if it stayed at 3, there is no, you have to have a minimum of 4 to be a personal care home. It has to be minimum 4, maximum 8. Yeah, that's.
Just up to 8.
No, it's minimum 4.
It is more than 3 adults, and more than 3, not exceeding 8.
Yeah, it has to be 4.
If there were just 3, there wouldn't be a case here, because you would have 3 unrelated people, and under the ordinance, that is okay, is family. I think we all agree on that, right? Less than 4, there's no case, there's no controversy. Well, okay, I don't think under the ordinance, the definition of family is 3 unrelated.
Yeah, even
adults.
aside from the definition of family, we're still saying that even though they're operating as a business, they're a nonprofit operating as a business in a residential 2 zone. Okay, I just wanted to stress that. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
This won't be long.
Go ahead.
Alex Roblicki, W-R-O-B as in boy, L-I-C-K-Y. 244 Voss. Just hearing what's going back and forth here about the zoning classifications. If a nonprofit organization, company, corporation can change zoning so that they can allow for these types of facilities in anything from R2 up, okay? You're essentially, and as I've demonstrated, and I will come back with actual comps, they overpay with cash on the sun. They can come in, it's a concern, not necessarily true, but it's very likely they could come and they could buy every other house and just keep buying neighborhoods and just converting these things into these types of care facilities it will fundamentally change the nature of this community. Okay, that's why those zoning restrictions are there. They're not being discriminated against. They could have bought in R2, or sorry, R3, R4, or 5, or C1, 2, 3. You guys bought wrongly, you made a mistake. It's time to fess up. I'm a realtor, I can sell it for you, but you're not gonna get support for it.
Do we have a motion to adjourn? All in favor, say aye.
So Steve, did we accept